Hi guys, welcome. Today's another day with a guest here on this podcast. Podcast, I say. It's a video, right? But maybe we'll turn that into a podcast on a later point. Lukasz Skotny is once again here, and I very
Hi.
welcome you here. Thank you for being here and sharing once again your views.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah. I thought it would be a great idea to just let my viewers know a little bit more about your background. So, where are you coming from? How did you get into the FEA? And I think I never talked about this topic on this channel as well. So maybe we just share our stories here. And I would
Sure.
let you start with that.
All right. So my road to FEA was a rather bumpy one, mostly because my father has a PhD in engineering. So even in high school, I knew a lot about engineering. When I started stuff, I already know what stability is and things like that when I started university. But being raised as an engineer also make you somehow, at least in my case, not liking the very complex mathematics, because engineers tend to be extremely practical. This was also part, maybe not of my upbringing, but how I translated stuff. To me, engineering was like the things that gentlemen do to make practical decisions about important matters. And differential equations didn't fit in that description very well. So at university, we only had one semester of, I can't honestly say it was about FEA. It was more like computer-aided design. And during that semester, there were three classes with Cosmos M FEA solver. So the task was you got four A4 sheets of paper with an instruction, and as a typical software tutorial, click this, enter 5, click that, after 7, click this, whatever, right? So I did that totally not thinking about it. And then that was my entire FEA career at that point. So when I started doing a PhD, my thesis tutor told me look, Lukasz, it's 21st century and all that, and you're doing shell stability stuff, so you have to do nonlinear FEA to your PhD because otherwise it will suck. And my first thought was, oh my god, differential equations and matrix operations, I will die. That was the instant thought. And for a week or two, I was sitting there thinking do you do it by hand? How this is even done? So my university had a scientific abacus license, so I applied to get it, and I started to fool around, and it was a super irritating process. It took me I think over a year easily to converge first nonlinear analysis, because nobody told me that it's difficult. It's a classical, we recently talked about PhD, right? So it was a classical thing. Hey, young guy, wing it, right? And you think okay, everybody's doing it, so I will do it. And then later you realize nobody have idea how you do it. They just push you under the bus and wait for you to come up with answers, right? I've spent almost over a year feeling like an idiot that I can't do something that apparently everybody's doing. And I was literally clicking around and see what happens. So when I first converged my analysis, nonlinear one, it was a very bad analysis, wrongly supported, poorly defined, but it converged to give an answer that looked like this beautiful rainbow. And I really remember what that was. I was so proud of myself, you would not believe it. So that was how I started doing FEA in academia, let's say. And I started a PhD and a company at the same time. So while I was crying tears, clicking around randomly in Abacus during nights, on a day job in the company, we actually solve actual problems that I know how to calculate, and we used way simpler tools because we couldn't afford very complex solvers at the time. And it was a big clash. But then the first time I had to model something with actual shell elements to see the stress distribution in a connection that couldn't be designed otherwise, I realized that there is an overlap between what I did at university and what I did in a company. And like, it occurred to me like 2 years in a PhD, which is like, this is a very good like testament of how practical science can be. So I realized that there is an overlap, and from there it went quickly. Like I realized that I have to learn it, and I already knew like more or less what things were, how they were working. And a few years later, we bought the first like solver for the company, and then the second and third, and here I am. Like 10, 15 years later, it's like long.
It's an interesting story. So this was even before the time you had any YouTube tutorials about how to reprocess something like a nonlinear analysis. Or
by
something.
the eyes, I see that you are younger than me. I can tell you honestly that I remember times when there was no YouTube at all.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe nowadays, but there was a period in human history when YouTube was not around, and I kind of like I have a recollection of that.
Yeah.
So when I was at first years at university, like there was no YouTube at all. Like and then of course it was dominated by cat videos and stuff like that.
The early days.
So like nobody had idea, like it would, like, to the point that when I was clicking randomly around searching how to do stuff in Abacus, it didn't occur to me to search online for manuals and help. And maybe I would find something if I would thought about it back then, but I didn't. It was like internet was not the same place that it is now.
That's right. That's right, for sure. It was a different time. But did you also consider just reading through the help documents of Abacus? I know they're overwhelming just with every FEA processor, but...
Well, you have like... I assume that I will do my PhD in 3-4 years. That gave me 1 year of preparation, 1 year of laboratory testing, 1 year of computing and writing. So I had like several months. The help manual for Abacus is several thousand pages.
Yeah.
So I divided the amount of pages by the amount of days and came out short. So I decided that I will quicker randomly do stuff. And I was like, I must admit that after I figured out most of the basics, the mechanical department at my university opened a PhD course on how to use Abacus. And
perfect timing.
yeah, like I already knew more or less how it worked. So they allowed me to go there, even though I was a civil engineer. So I've learned like a lot there on how to click, where things are. But I remember that when I went to the professor who ran this course, showed him like a stability path of the shell, which goes up and then goes down, and you cannot iterate it by force because it won't converge. And I showed him that and I said, like, how do you make it converge? And he said, like, that's an impossible chart. You will never get that. And I said, like, nope, I have a book. It like you can see it's here. Like, and he said, like, nah, that's impossible. So it was a different approach. Like mechanical people don't do with stability a lot. They do other things, obviously. So there was still a lot of figuring out. But yeah, in the end, that was more or less how I started.
All right. Maybe I share a younger version of that on my story. So, well, it's not that far away, right? But my way into FEA was like this. We didn't even have in the bachelor's degree. We didn't even have a FEA class. Nothing at all. We had mechanics, right? And we also had stuff with computers, I call that. We did some Visual Basic programming and Excel.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Really,
we didn't
advanced, but nothing FEA. And then we have this practical semester, which allows us to go into into industry, right, for 1 semester. And there I got the task. Well, we heard about this new tool. It was not new, but OptiStruct, topology optimization. We could use a practical semester student to just evaluate that for us. How good is it? How does it compare with the design?
You get paid for this, or like I'm not sure how the semester works.
Small amount you get paid for. Like I think now it's a bit
chicken soup and noodles.
Yeah, ramen. That's right. I think it was back in the days, $300 or 400
Okay.
a month, something like that. Yeah, but they told me, yeah, you should evaluate the optimization of a part within FEA, and I didn't knew nothing about FE in general, right? I didn't know anything, but I always that's let me just push back a little. You mentioned that the engineer are those practical guys, right? And I think there's this division, or maybe I'm not fitting perfectly into this category, because I went into the engineering world, and yeah, you have those guys which are always they just like to learn this much that they can solve their problems in their own garage. That's their main
Okay.
focus. And then on the other side, you have, I think you could call them a little bit more geeky people who love to work with computers, who just love that. And I'm more a guy of the later spectrum. Well, not entirely, but more of the later spectrum. So I was doing my engineering degree and thinking about myself, well, all these other guys, they do stuff all the time. They manufacture things, they try things out, and I was not really interested in that. And with the FEA world opening up, I fell in love with that. So they sent me to trainings, and I got to know a bit about this. And then in the master's degree, it was like all those topics emerge. So we had then FEA, and I know already much more than my colleagues about it, and this even got me more hooked with the topic. And so I started with FEA, and it's stuck with me. And
Wow.
until now, yeah.
So like I had a way more rough start. Nobody trained me.
It was hard.
But I can totally understand that I like working with computer parts. Like in primary school, I actually took coding classes in Turbo Pascal. Yeah, there was a language once.
Okay, so you have this geeky side too, right?
Yeah, I do. But when it comes to something like complex mathematics, my brain just switches off, and I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
Not going there.
Well, I'm not a big specialist or fan of that either. So I'm pretty much the same about this. So if I can get myself around this, I will do that. But yeah. So what? Yeah. But yeah. So this is the way we got into FEA. That's quite interesting. Some different stories, but yeah, also have something in common. And another thing I would want to ask you is about. So you have a pretty good knowledge about what makes an FEA specialist a good one, right? So you learned a lot about it, you applied a lot about it, and you have your own company doing that. So, consider a student who thinks about the question, well, should I get more into FEA or shouldn't I do that? What would be a way? What's the topics he should focus on? Maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think that I will surprise at least some people. Although if they know my blog and me, maybe they won't be that surprised. But I would say that most important parts of FEA are not related to FEA at all. Like FEA is just a fancy calculator. Like it does super colorful plots and stuff, but in essence, it's basically a calculator, right? So to use it, you kind of need to know what you want to do and how, because otherwise it's like a glorified Excel sheet. You can just punch stuff and it will always spill out something, right? But I would focus definitely on very big basics of statics, strength of materials, like various material properties. The problem with this, and I'm telling you this, and if I would be a student, like if you would told me this those 20 years ago when I was a student, I would cringe, because all of those topics were turbo, theoretical, differential equation, heavy stuff that I hated. While in fact, strength of material is super fun. It's like a super geeky stuff where you can do like, experiments at home and weird things. So I wouldn't focus necessarily on mathematics. Like, obviously, I don't think that I would be able to focus on those even if I wanted to. Yeah. But understanding how things work, like how it is that you resist stress, how it is that you bend, what the laws that you learn about really mean for you. For you and objects you can take in your hand and meddle with them to some extent. Then understanding this will help, because if you then do FEA and you get something stupid as an outcome, you will have this like mental imagination of, wait a second, if I would take it in my hand and do this and like this shouldn't like move there, right? So understanding of basics is very important. You don't have to like prove anything using the equations. You don't have to even know equations, but you should get a feeling of how things work. So that would be the first part. I wouldn't stress a lot about software. That's something many people ask me about. Of course, if you know which industry you will go to, I will go on LinkedIn, find few experts in that field and ask them which software are used most often in that industry. Because like if you want to practice FEA, it's best to practice on a software that you have a decent chance of using in your career. For instance, I was learning FEA in Abacus, which is absolutely not used in civil engineering. It's a scientific program. So if I would be still a scientist, that would be a good knowledge, but I had to actually learn another software. But the truth is that as long as you know what you want to do, software is easy. It will take you 2-3 weeks to get adjusted to whatever other program you are using, because you already know what you want to do. You just don't know where to click to get it. So in the very worst case, you will Google something like, where to click to support my point in whatever software in 3 directions, right? And like, I'm pretty certain there's a database of the manufacturer of the software that will tell you this. And there's most like 30-second YouTube video tutorial that shows you this, right? But if you would punch in Google something like, how should I properly support my model? You're dead in the water. Like, there is no answer. So understanding this is way more important, because you have to have it to do the work, and you won't be able to Google it. But where to click is easy to come by. So just pick whatever software you have access to, preferably that you have a chance to use in your actual career, and start playing around. Like, imagine a problem and try to solve it, and just click around, do stuff, watch what other people are doing. You can also read scientific articles if you have the grit for it, and find those that describe experiments, preferably simple ones. So search for old scientific documents like 60s and 70s, where we didn't know a lot of basic stuff, like basic from today's perspective at least. And like, because then they did tests that are simpler. Nowadays tests are so complex that building a model like that will take a lot of time and experience, and you want the simple stuff. So find the simplest you can solve and try to solve that. And after a while you will realize that you can do a bit more difficult stuff, and a bit more and a bit more, and in 10 years you'll get wherever you want to, basically.
Maybe also, if I can just pick on that, if you have a book which talks about analytical solutions for mechanical problems, just use a simple analytical example and try to model that within a FEA tool. And then compare them.
That would be cool.
And because then you also get the feeling that you always have to make your hand calculations, right? So you get a feeling of, is the FEA result to be trusted or not?
My take on this, that's a very good point, Manuel. My take on this is that what I don't like about those analytical problems is that they are usually extremely theoretical. They don't often have relation to the real world work in some sense, right? I did like hundreds upon hundreds of different analytical examples in my life, mostly during university years when I was learning that. But most of them are useless now, because I know that reality is so much more complex than those analytical examples that it's tricky. But it's true, if I would like to firstly get a feel that it even works, doing an analytical example and proving to myself that FEA gives the same answer gives me like a feeling that FEA works. And then I would go a step further, assuming that you are training at university to do like an engineering job of some sort, at least part of the projects will be design something. So when you know and you are fairly certain that you can design something safely and it's simple, try to calculate that in FEA. Because you can design it, you know what will work, and you can build your model and see how it behaves, if it works, what is different, and you can ask around, and you can go to a lecturer, for instance, or like write to the blogger or whatever, and say, hey, like I did the hand calculations of this is the outcome, and I did FEA and it looks so weird. What went wrong? And you kind of like, it's a completely different question than how do I calculate a cantilever? Like, because the proper answer is quickly and correctly. That's how you're supposed to do it, right?
You get also a feeling for, in this case, model detail and where it's necessary and where it is not necessary. So also the difference between element types and stuff like that. So that's what we were doing at university at the lectures, to just try things out, model something in 3D, in 2D, in 1D, the same problem, and see the different outcomes. And,
that's a very good point.
I was so surprised that you could have, with less elements, you could have a better answer for your problem. So it was, what? Because it's not true that more effort also gets you the better answer. This is also, I think, a very good point in FEA. Yeah. All right. So you talked a little bit about coding and your coding lessons in your school years. Engineers in the FEA field, they tend to be a lot more open to macros and little programming scripts for post-processing, pre-processing, you name it. One key thing which they aim at is automation, right? So boring tasks, repetitive, stupid tasks you want to get rid of, and there automation plays a key role. Could you talk a little bit about your, if automation at all plays a role on your daily business? And
I already had a chance to mention my father, so now my wonderful wife entered the stage. She's an IT. She works in IT, so she studied IT as well. And when I was doing my PhD, since I was randomly clicking around, it took ages to do anything. And one glorious evening, she came back, looked at my screen, and watched me work for 5 minutes. And she said, you know what? There has to be a simpler way of doing this. Have you considered scripting? And then I remembered, hey, I actually learned Turbo Pascal in primary school. That's a good idea. So, funny enough, finding a Python tutorial on the internet back then was already manageable. So I think that I had a Python book and a video tutorial. No, it was not video. It was a web page with how the basic procedures of Python work. And since I already know algorithmics and all that, I wrote a script that generated several thousands of models for my PhD. I didn't have to do them manually. That was super. And then I made one of my dumbest engineering judgment calls, and I put my laptop on several books, put a huge fan to cool it, and I press calculate on 70 or 80 queued jobs one by one, and I went for 3 weeks of holidays. I managed to burn the hard drive and RAM, but no fire happened. So I was spot on.
At least that.
New laptop later, I started doing this script in smaller batches, and I generated at least 1,000 models. And I since I wanted to have very little work, the scripts calculated the Abacus stuff, generated the Excel sheet with summary of outcomes, everything. I never opened them because it was so much data was there that it was incomprehensible to use that. And this is my first very important lesson about automation. You can generate so much output that you would basically have to write a script to think in your stead to analyze the outcomes, because you won't be able to. It will be too overwhelming. And this doesn't mean that we don't... Sorry, go.
Well, that's the data science, right? So this is... This shifted, right? From the ages where from back before where you did your PhD to now, I think the world also has shifted to have also the possibility even to work on massive data.
Yes.
This was not possible earlier.
Well, even if it was way too difficult for a single guy with a limited time. So, so that taught me a lot. Then in my company, like I was mostly doing static design, designing components and things like that. So I've made tremendous amount of Excel sheets that aid me with that. I have a huge repository of those. I would be scared to use a single one of those because I have no idea what they do. I don't remember how I did it. So I've learned also that building 72 pages Excel sheets that does the calculation of entire world might not be the smartest move. It's better to have like several small Excel sheets that does only one thing, but correctly, and you don't have to check that, right? Because otherwise the tool becomes so oppressive that you're afraid to use it because you don't remember what it does. So when it comes to automation...
You just learned, sorry for interrupting, but there you just learned one of the most important lessons of object-oriented programming, right? So just one class is doing one thing and one thing only.
Well, I happen to stumble upon very important life lessons mostly by doing the completely opposite and learning that it was a bad idea.
Yeah, that's one way to learn it, yeah.
Yeah, but since then, I'm very reluctant to start coding a new automated routine unless I'm crystal clear on what it's supposed to do and that we really need it. And there are a few things that I did in my life, like generation of imperfections in shell structures that we use in our designs from time to time, and some other tools like that, and like Excel sheets that generate material data models, stuff like that. So I definitely use automation. I'm sadly not sufficiently good in like objective coding to do very complex things, because when I was learning how to code, I don't think there was objective coding. Like you just used Turbo Pascal and there were procedures there. There wasn't like objects.
Yeah,
you couldn't define classes as far as I know. Like it's been many years.
For sure, there were languages which could do that, but I think there was also the functional programming was way bigger. But it's even used today, but don't call me out on that. I'm not an expert in this regard. We could ask your wife that. But I think a functional programming is used if you want to have pretty damn fast cycle times, but you don't.
Trust me, that was not a consideration when I was learning.
You just put the stuff together and click run and
it just works. Yes, exactly.
Sure. I know that feeling. Yeah.
So, but to answer your question, I think that automation, if you can drill down this very small task that you do over and over again, and you can automate it, it's gold. Yes. The surprising experience of mine is it's very difficult to find a repetitive task because they are repetitive, but they are not the same. Like if you repeat a similar action all the time, but it's always a bit different. It becomes nuanced. And then writing tools to solve this particular problem will be so much more difficult. But when you have something very simple, then absolutely, it's a good idea. And I do agree that people that work in FEA, they tend to be more open to coding, but I definitely think that you can be easily okay without any programming skills. And sure. I don't think that, like, my success definitely does not depend on the fact that I know a little how to code and I made like some tools that help me. I think that even without them, I would still be where I am. It's just make things a bit sweeter and a bit simpler, but in the long run, it's not as important as some people think. So that's also important to mention, I think. But
yeah, for me, coding also changes your way of approaching things. So it's if you're doing stuff manually, you want to have it done with as less clicks as possible. That's how the big frameworks are structured. They tend to couple things together, what you want to do, what you want to apply, for example, apply a boundary condition, and you want to have it with as less clicks as possible. So if you want to select a surface and all the nodes there, which you want to have fixed, it's something like you click a node and say by face and then apply. So this routine, but when you coding stuff, you have not a bad feeling about large amounts of very simple instructions, like fix that node, fix that node, fix that node, and this one too, and make this 100 times larger. For a manual process, that would be hell. But for an automated version, it's nothing fancy.
Yes,
right?
That's true.
Because the FEA software itself translates this less clicks into the many operations itself too, and there's logic behind that. So it's maybe the same outcome with two different ways.
Right? Yeah, totally.
So you also have different languages applied in your work. So what's your favorite one? Or do you have a favorite one?
Well, Turbo Pascal, because it was primary school, and I even tried to pick up girls on my programming skills, and surprisingly, it didn't work very well back then. But Turbo Pascal is definitely the best one. My mom had an IT guy in her company, and they paid him to lead after work to teach me how to code in Turbo Pascal. So it was like a childhood dream. It was so cool. Like I really, really enjoyed it. So Turbo, like, I don't even know if you can still compile it. Like if you would Google Turbo Pascal, I'm not sure if you would even find something. But it was like the
legacy
best.
code, always. Languages never die.
I know
they do, but
so
the large ones don't.
Yeah. So that would be it. But from practical reasons, I think that I would have to call Visual Basic. Mostly because FEMAP uses it as an interface for writing scripts for FEMAP that I use for FEA. I liked Python more because Abacus used Python scripts. So when I was generating those thousands of models that burn my computer, I was doing that in Python. Yeah. And I think that Python is like, for me, it was easier to understand somehow. It was more like Turbo Pascal for whatever reason.
Easy to read, right? It's not that complicated.
Yes, and like with Visual Basic, it's like
I hate it. I hate it.
It's doable. Like if you have like a YouTube guide and few websites open and you know kind of what to copy paste, you will be okay. But it's not as fun. It's more like technical juice and less of actual like making the script and algorithm that does something. Like there are more like mumbo jumbo stuff that you have to like fit in. So, but since that's the only one I can use in actual work, because like in FEMAP I can only use Visual Basic basically. That would be my default favorite. I could potentially hook up .NET to I think, and then use C# or stuff like that. But I had very small experience there, so I'm unable to compare those, to be honest.
Okay. Maybe I can talk a little bit about my experience with the languages. It was, for me, during my PhD, we coded largely in Java, which is, not the obvious choice for a engineer. Because Java is like, I don't want to compare it to Visual Basic, but Java is more orientated to the IT world, where you want to have platform independency. So it should run on whatever, a mobile phone, Linux, Windows, all the same. There, Java is pretty good. But for scientific or engineering purposes, Python would be definitely my favorite. Because also it's easy to learn. Java, you get a hiccup because all those null pointer exceptions we caught along the way, and trying to figure out what's wrong with the code. Well, it's okay if you dealt with it and programmed a time in Java, you're okay and you're done with it. Same with C++, but C++ I never really did full. But I personally don't have any knowledge in functional programming. I know the concept, but I did not do a single line of code in Haskell or whatever it's called.
Yeah, beautiful time.
Yeah. Well, it's a different kind of philosophy behind it. And it's there is some benefits to it, so that you can prove the validity of the code by just the structure. But coding in object-oriented style is, for me at least, much more easy, because you can see things and you can divide and conquer, right? You can make a class for that.
I do
class for
agree
that.
that. Yeah, sometimes when you do it like Turbo Pascal stuff and you wanted to do like a complex operation, there are so many procedures involved, one after another, that you just like lost track of how this goes through the whole thing. Yeah.
Yes.
So having an object that actually does this thing and then goes to the next object that does this thing and so on, it was so much easier. Sure.
Yeah, we were with a large part considered with the question how to model mainly the whole product cycle of engineering process, and their object-oriented programming languages help tremendously, because you can model each thing and put stuff together, and that was quite good. One main reason for coding in engineering is, or in this approach in particular, was that you would want to have one single source of truth and not so many different engineering models, which may not be consistent. You have information A here, but information B here, and the E modulus are different for whatever reason, and so your whole process is invalid. But if you have just one source, it's easier. But how to create the source? This is the next task then. But I have so to summarize it up, I definitely am a fan of Python, and right now I'm doing a little bit of a fun exercise, and I don't know if you noticed on my channel with the bridge builder.
Of course.
Yeah, this it's for me it's a fun
I don't
project.
code that well. That's for sure.
But I'm not coding that well either. So this is the main difference, I think, between IT guys and the engineer. So we are just applying stuff, and if it works good, and if it doesn't, well, screw it all over.
I have to copy paste
again.
something else.
Yes. It's much more practical than the theory behind it, right? So running times, complexity of different methods and stuff like that. So for me, it's a bit hard to just get this knowledge, because I didn't took it in university. Well, I could teach myself now that, and I'm doing, but it will not be the same if I had studied IT, for example.
Yeah, of course. Like
it's a fun project. Yeah. But you learn so much when trying to code a problem. You're trying to extract the main things. What are the methods which you have to bind together? What are the inputs? What are the outputs? And then a rather simple problem, what seems to be, gets really complex if you want to have it automated completely and valid and reasonable. And so
that's totally true.
I think it's a pretty good opportunity for a learning journey. So this is my reason why I want to do this.
I must confess that I always tell people that I'm not skilled enough to code my own FEA solver. But maybe when I retire one day, just for giggles, I will sit down and learn what it takes to actually do it, just to see, how this works. Because I do agree that to some extent, if you know how to code, there's like, oh, so this is why. You may know the answer, but you don't know the question, right? And now, like, you code it, and then oh, so this is why we do this, right? And I think that it wouldn't have much in terms of how it would change my work now or make anything invalid of what I understand or know. But for this scientific curiosity, it would be a fun experiment to have the time to actually do it, right? Yeah. There is no money to be earned on writing a simple FEA solver, but it can grow me as a person. That would be an interesting thing.
It definitely grows your understanding about it. Well, I'm talking like I have done that, but I didn't. But I seen the same principle on different topics when we're applying coding. It's just a way of formalizing, like also with norms. So if you have understood a area of interest well enough, you could put it into norms where everyone can follow. And But I remember a saying of my professor that whenever stuff is normed, that's the intellectual death of that part because nothing is developed anymore.
Well, it's even worse, I think, to the point that when you norm something, there are nuances that are obvious to people writing the norm. And then 20 years later, everybody's blind to the nuance, and this could lead to errors. Because it's not only that people don't understand this anymore, they don't understand it, and following a good guide, they can make stupid mistakes. Because you kind of lose the depth of what you are trying to accomplish, right? Not to mention that sometimes people writing norms made honest mistakes, and you're oblivious to that. So yeah. To this, I easily agree.
There should be a kind of garbage collector for norms. So at a certain time they are valid, and then they become invalid if not reinstated. So to be adapted. Same thing goes with
but
law.
Then this would be a very vicious cycle of people actually using those. Because
that's also correct.
It would be like a huge hurdle to keep up with what's the newest edition of whatever.
Yeah, that's also right. I think there are reasons for both.
Yeah, of course, but you would also want to believe that if you designed something 5 years ago and now the code's changed, that your previous design is still like okay. You don't want to have a revolution every 5 years.
Yeah, sure, that's right. Sense, and it should go into the right direction, so it should improve.
Yes, but I think that nowadays we see making it more detailed as an improvement. And I feel that that's not necessarily the best direction, because while having a lot of details is great, it also kind of like makes you blind to the importance of things. Because like out of 1,000 of numbers, 3 are the important part, and the rest is just like, stuff. But if you don't know the background well enough, you have no idea which 3 of the 1,000. So suddenly everything is equally important, and you have no idea what actually is important and so on. So the more detail, the more complexity you add to it, then a person who's very like fluent in solving the given problem will benefit from it. But many users will be overwhelmed with the complexity, which leads to stupid rules, let's wing it. And this is not what you should aim for.
I think that's also partly because the norm has to take into account each special case you can think of. And that's why it's getting complexer.
No, not necessarily. Like usually codes, like at least in my industry, usually codes write something like, you should consider this or that. And it doesn't say how, it just tells you that you have to.
Okay,
so they don't even bother, like they don't even bother to describe it in any way. They just say it's your, like you have to do it, dog. And that's that, right? So I feel that it's not as simple. Of course, there are better norms and worse norms. Some were written very user-friendly and some are completely not that. But sometimes the complexity is needed, obviously, but you can overdo it, and that would be a pretty bad thing.
Yeah, so redundancy also in this case, because if you have all right, let's turn to something different. A buzzword which is thrown all around town since a couple of years is AI, machine learning, and stuff like that, right? And I just wanted to get your opinion on that. From an engineer who heard of that, will we get replaced as an engineer in the future? What do you think?
Okay. Well, first of all, since I have no idea about AI whatsoever and I'm on the internet, I will gladly share my opinion. So
go for it.
Like I honestly cannot say that I'm very interested in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and stuff like that whatsoever. I have no practical interest. However, I have, surprisingly, for a person who knows very little about it, I have a very strong opinion about it as well. I mean, if I would be working on a very repetitive work with very little input and constant output, I would be pretty worried. Because you could automate that. And basically we are, since the dawn of like Industry 4.0 or whatever they call it nowadays, that you use more machines for labor. We are doing this to ourselves non-stop, right? And many people in factories lost, quote unquote, their jobs because machines do them now. But you need people manufacturing those machines. You need people maintaining those machines. So it's not that we will just be unemployed. We just kind of shift toward what can be done. It has many social impacts because those are usually like higher end jobs that require certain expertise and so on. So we are like making the easier jobs not available because those are easier to automatically replace. This may have like social repercussions in many different levels, but I'm absolutely not like qualified to discuss that. However, I always consider engineering to be an art. And as soon as I will go to a cinema for a movie that was directed by artificial intelligence, I will start to worry about losing my job. Before then, I'm fine. If we think about it, like we both write scripts for various things, right? If I would have to write a script that does a small portion of what I do each day, I would have to have a team of 1,000 people and God only knows how many years to make it sufficiently complex to get close to what I do in 15 minutes of my day work. Because there are so many random components like phone calls and stuff that you have to deal with in some sense, right? And then gut feeling is a big part of it as well. And like the design itself, it's robust and complex. And there are so many things you have to consider. And many of those are not directly tied to equations as such. Because like you can automate making a lot of equations, but if it would be so simple, we wouldn't have jobs for many, many years now because Excel sheets aren't that young. And like if it was so easy, we would already be jobless. So to this extent, I'm not afraid. If I would be designing super simple things that are the same over and over again, and I myself wouldn't be certain why I even do this, then maybe a bit. But I'm using arc length in FEA. That's an algorithm devised by Rix and Crisfield in like early 70s. So it has 50 years. And most people still have like, whoa, you do this like post-critical, that's awesome, right? So that's cool. If like someone have this USB stick and say like, this is the first actual like artificial intelligence, it will replicate, and it will take time to adjust to use it. I don't think that it's dangerous to my job. And of course, maybe there are concerns like, if artificial intelligence will become self-aware and kill us all or something like that. Like, I don't know. Like, I didn't even watch Terminator, so I'm not that good in this. I think I watched like one, but I don't remember which one. So.
Okay. Well, no, I don't think Terminator is an realistic scenario, but you can find lots of people discussing really that matter. If self-awareness will happen at some point, what also makes self-awareness, what is awareness, and can get a lot down this rabbit hole.
Yeah. It's a 21st century. We've been around thousands of years, and we still don't know what it means that we're conscious. If you have to define that, like nobody knows what that means. Like we just are.
Yeah, and we don't know what's causing that. We just know it's some sort of emergence. So you put stuff together, and then somehow consciousness arises. But how? I think there's still a lot to learn there. But what I agree with you that we will not get replaced by robots. I think certain tasks, as we're already doing that, will get replaced. The repetitive tasks will get replaced with scripts if they're easy, if they are possible. Also, if you can get all the information, because sometimes you don't. And I also find it very interesting, and have considered that a while back, that engineering actually is an art. And as soon as you have the art component in a field, so it's a lot harder to measure it. right? So I went to conferences and they talked about how do you measure beauty, and they had shape functions, and then they did interviews with people, what they find appealing and what not. And there are rules. There are some things which you can measure and then decide if something is beautiful or not. But is it the same for each person?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I was like, the cultural dependence
hole.
would be like.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, and then on the other side, I think that machine learning and AI, so the buzzwords, right? But actually, in my PhD, I was using machine learning quite a lot and wasn't even aware of it. Well, I did clustering, right? I had lots of data points and I wanted to cluster them into similar groups. That's machine learning. But you wouldn't think there's a actual conscious roboter emerging out of this task. No, it isn't. But it will greatly enhance your ability to get things done. And also, I think the data science aspect of it, right? So working with large data, getting knowledge out of data. There's this really interesting talk from, I think it's called Daniel Kriesel. It's a German guy who works in AI, so a software guy. And he was I don't know, maybe you remember, he was that guy who found that printer scanner bug. A scanner, large corporation, I don't know the name of the company. Large company, scanner. They scanned an image and the numbers were different. So an 6 got to be an 8, for example. It's quite good if you have accounting stuff like that. What they did was they scanned through the image and did a search and replace because they wanted to save file size, right? That was the bug. It really happened. Google that. That's really a fascinating story. But the point I was talking about, this guy has a talk about how he managed to get knowledge about the internals of Spiegel, it's a German news magazine, by just pulling the articles. He just downloaded article each hour, each day, whatever, from the website to his computer. And by having measures like number of words, publication date, where the authors are placed and stuff like that, he could derive the structure of Spiegel internal and see which colleagues go to vacation together because then they don't post something. You know? It's a really funny story. I think nowadays we have so many simulation data, and they can be harvested too. What God knows what's in there.
Yeah, people share so much about themselves too, right?
That's right.
So we are all basically data sets. But this automation, I remember once a very good professor of mine told us, look, kids, when I was young, if you wanted to call another city, you had to call the postal office and order an intercity call.
Yeah.
And they will try to connect you, and it may take anything between 1 day to 3 days, and you just sit at home waiting for the connection. And now you can put a phone out of your pocket, dial the number, and it's there. When I went as a young guy to a tram station, there was no guide on when the trams come. The tram comes when it comes. Nobody knew when it will come. They will just knew that at some point the tram will come. And yet I had time to do everything I wanted, and you don't have time for anything. And I feel that that's the big downside, that we're maximizing profits by making stuff very automated, basically. But it has impact on other things as well. And if I would be worried about something, it's not that I will lose the job or that many people will, in fact, because I don't think that this would be drastic, although I'm very unaware of the topic. It's just a gut feeling. But our lives will speed up even more. And I don't think I like the idea. So that would be the part that worries me about artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think same point can be made for a factory worker back in the days when the machines first came up, industrialization, and the dream was let the machines do the work and we can have and enjoy our life, free time. but it wasn't like that, right? So it was
something went wrong.
Less.
That's for sure.
Yes, we didn't work less, and I think the same can be true with the automation part. If you can automate it, you're faster. You can do many things faster, but you won't do. You won't be occupied less time with that.
Exactly. And the pressure is higher. Because if you had a week to do something and you felt bad on Monday and didn't appear to work, you still have 4 days to finish it, right? But if you have to turn cycle something every 1 minute, you cannot be distracted. You cannot make a phone call. Like it's a very difficult thing to be involved with, I think. So everything happens faster and faster nowadays without any apparent reason. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
we basically try to catch up with technology we've developed. And we are losing with the machines because they are so efficient. So
that's right. Yeah, they grow pretty fast.
They do.
Yeah, but
and we don't.
And we don't. Yeah, that's right. We have a basic set of calculation power in our brains, but it will not be like with that curve that it doubles every 10 years or something like that. The calculation capacity. No,
I think wasn't it like a year and a half or something?
A year? Could be. Yeah. I think it's more.
We both are like super.
But we don't. That's for sure. We don't. We have a fixed set, but we learn more stuff for sure. But it's not compared to the machines. But I think maybe we can also close that. It's exciting times. Somewhat worrisome times you could think of. But I try to have an optimistic view on the future, and also with machine learning, the benefits may be better than the downsides, I hope, at least.
Well,
what do you think?
Honestly, I tend to be in emotional life. I tend to gravitate toward depression. So I can't honestly say that I try to have a positive outlook on the future. I can say that I desperately try to have a positive outlook on the future. So I feel, funny enough, that it will be as it always been, you know? Like, I don't really feel that whatever we come up with, as long as we manage to be humans to each other, it will be just okay. Like,
I think, that's the most important part.
Yeah,
you can be effective what you want, but if you lose the human side, you lost the main thing.
Yeah, I don't think that machine learning will drastically change how I work. Like, even let's say quantum computers, those super fast computers that use quantum power. Right? Let's assume that it's so common technology that I have a laptop that does this stuff, right? Like that wouldn't change my I would read less books because when you press calculate you already have the so I don't think that I would work less. I don't think that I would work less. I will just do more, right? So to this end, I don't think that my life would drastically change, and that would most likely be like that. But what do I know? Like, I'm not qualified to make any guesses.
Well, we will see for the time being, and as long as we are here. And
being optimistic, it's a good trait if you can pull this off.
It's a good thing to try to remember to be that. It's not always easy. Yeah, that's definitely for sure. All right, Lukasz, thanks so much for being here again.
Manu, thank you for having me. As always, it's a huge pleasure to be here.
To the viewers, if you have any questions to myself or to Lukasz, let us know in the comments. Feel free to like, subscribe as always, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks, Lukasz, again for being here.
Thank you. Take care, guys.